Redditors with real-life butterfly effect stories. What happened and what was the series of events and outcomes? I was going out to grab pizza and a case of beer for me and my roommate, but he texted me that he had a stomach thing, so I walked to a restaurant and ordered dinner at the bar and met a girl there. And now we are married and have 2 kids because my roommate had diarrhea. Story 2. I overdrafted and caused 4 marriages and 5 babies. Longer version, I was just out of high school and new in town with no job. I was living off what savings I had left, and my account went below zero without me knowing. I was overdraft charged like 10 times and owed $300 plus. I went down to the bank, spoke with a teller, and she ended up being a lifesaver. She worked with me and got all the charges removed. On top of getting the charges removed, we got to talking about my situation, and she said that her son worked at a local restaurant and she would help me get a job. She was a woman of her word, and by the end of the week, I was working full-time. Fast forward, I meet a cool dude who worked there. We became friends. I introduced him to my sister. They fell in love, got married, and had 2 kids. His best friend came into town for the wedding, and I introduced him to my roommate at the time. They fell in love, got married, and had 2 babies. I also got my best friend a job at the restaurant where he met a girl working there. They fell in love, got married, and had a kid. Right before I left, I got my roommate a job at the restaurant where he met a customer, fell in love, got married, and had a kid. As a bonus, my best friend, who I helped get the job, repaid the favor and got me a job at a different restaurant where I met a girl, fell in love, and got married. Story 3. Pregnant cousin usually takes the bus at around 5:10 p.m. after work. She was about to hop inside the bus, but she needed to pee really badly. And the commute is about an hour long, so she decided to go to the restroom instead and just catch the next bus. That 5:10 bus ended up falling from a cliff. Story 4. I was walking to school and got distracted by a hedgehog that ran in a bush next to me. Then, a big-ass tree branch fell in front of me. Would have crushed me if I didn't get distracted by a spiky little mouse scurrying in the bushes. I gave him a dead cricket the next day. He took it and ran off. Speed spiky mouse. Story 5. Received an incredibly high-paying job offer to run our biggest competitor's team. Told my boss, even though I love my job, but it was more than double what I was making. Boss agreed to a reasonable raise, still not near the offer. I decided to stay because I genuinely loved my team/coworkers, and the money wasn't enough to leave that happy place. In exchange, I had to take up another account that meant a business trip I didn't have in the plans. Went on that trip and met my future husband. A couple of years later, we went on our honeymoon at a new resort in St. Lucia. Ran into someone I knew from home/work. Turns out the team that I'd been given the job offer for had made so much money that they had booked the same resort to celebrate. I sat there and went, wow, life is nuts. Would have ended up there either way. Story 6. I procrastinated one day in high school by watching a foreign musical on YouTube. I ended up trying to learn the lyrics and eventually the language. That led me to discovering the field of linguistics, which I'm now majoring in. I don't know what I'd be doing now, had I actually started doing my homework that day instead. Story 7. If my biological mom hadn't asked her parents to watch me for a couple hours and then left town, I wouldn't have had the incredible and privileged life that I was given through adoption. My younger half-brothers were raised by our biological mom, and they are a total freaking mess. I'm more of a mom to them than their actual mom, and I would have been an absolute wreck also if she'd kept me. Instead, I was given an amazing private education, all the sports and musical adventures, and most important, a healthy, loving home with 2 parents who taught me that just because you share blood doesn't mean you love. And just because you didn't give birth to a child doesn't mean you can't be their parent. Story 8. The wife and I were having dinner in Hawaii one night on vacation. As we were getting up to leave, I noticed she hadn't finished her beer. I told her she should finish the beer since we paid some ridiculous price for it. Fast forward 30 seconds and we leave the restaurant and are walking the 3 blocks back to the hotel. About 50 feet in front of us as we're walking down the sidewalk on the left side of the road. A car comes flying out of a side street from the right and crosses through the street, hops the sidewalk in front of us, and smashes into a wall. If she didn't finish her beer, we would have been smoked by the car and most likely squished between the car and the wall. We always finish our beer now. Story 9. When I was 18, I had a girlfriend, and her older brother owned a small company. He said to me, "You know, I think you'd be pretty good at this job. I'm 34 now and have a legitimate career that I love because I dated a girl for a bit. I also had a cat for the better part of that time period because of the girlfriend. I'm a cat person now." Story 10. Nearly every single friend I have in college is because one day in my Gen Ed health class, we had to pick a seat that would become our seat for the semester. When I came in, there weren't many seats left, and the people I sat next to ended up becoming my best friends and introduced me to all of my other friends in one way or another. Story 11. Just last month, a friend of mine told me a story from his recent heartbreak. He, let's call him Mickey, had been with this girl, Minnie, for almost 4 years when, out of nowhere, she told him she is leaving him and moving out. He had no idea the relationship was in jeopardy, but she dipped. Anyway, a few weeks go by. Mickey is hanging out with a coworker of his with who he had just recently met and ends up back at his place just to hang out. On the fridge, he sees a note in Minnie's handwriting. The note detailed several issues in Mickey and Minnie's relationship, and so Mickey asks his new friend where he found this note. Turns out, this new buddy had gone to the same music festival as Mickey and Minnie a few months prior. The friend had found the note on the ground of the parking lot and thought, "Wow, what a sad and angry note. I'm going to keep this because it's so raw and interesting." The next day, Minnie came over to pick up some of her things. Mickey produced the note and it led to a long, tear-filled conversation about their relationship and what went wrong. They didn't end up back together because despite the pseudonyms, this is no Disney story. However, the resulting discussion helped them both achieve closure in a meaningful way, all because a random coworker found and kept her discarded note in a festival parking lot. A bunch of you are saying Minnie was hooking up with the coworker, but I can assure you that was not the case. Mickey and Minnie had never even met the coworker, as Mickey and the coworker both worked jobs for a massive company and had never crossed paths until well after Minnie left. Mickey and him had just become friends days after the breakup. As for why he kept the note, he's just that kind of guy. He was moved by the content of the note, so he kept it. They weren't having an affair or anything, and if they were, that'd be well over because Minnie moved to another city the same week she left Mickey. Don't be too cynical, folks. Sometimes things just don't work out. And for those thinking Mickey is partly at fault for the relationship ending and being oblivious to the reasons for her sudden leaving, of course he is. And he recognizes. He recognizes his role in the situation and doesn't hate her or anything. He just wants her to be happy and is heartbroken over both of their failures in making that happen. He's a good guy and he's learning. For people saying, "I am in fact Mickey, I am not," haha. I'm happily married for 1 year, and you could probably comb through my other comments to prove it if you really wanted, but that would be boring. However, if you prefer the narrative that I'm Mickey, far be it from me to dissuade you. Story 12. Almost everything that has happened in my life for the past 8 years is a direct result of me literally flipping a coin to decide between 2 colleges. I play the sport I do, have the friends I do, am dating the person I am, and very nearly every other aspect of my life is because a nickel landed on heads. Story 13. At the end of 6th grade, my class took a field trip on a whale watch. That night, I saw a commercial for a documentary TV series on whales. Ever since that day, I wanted to grow up and protect whales from being hunted. Today, I work in the military, specializing in marine preservation. Story 14. This happened 2 days ago. It was early in the morning, and as I'm about to leave for work, when my mom reminded me that I forgot my water bottle on the table while I was walking out. For whatever reason, I decided to go leave my backpack in the car and then walk back into the house for the water bottle. Well, that took about maybe 10 seconds total. It started to rain heavily on my way to work and couldn't see very well, but I noticed the brake lights of the cars ahead stopping suddenly and some moving off onto the shoulder, and decided to slow down and put the hazard lights on for the people behind to slow down. Well, it turns out everyone was braking because a 4 to 5 car accident had just happened seconds before. All the cars were scattered across the highway, spread across the left-right shoulders, and another had hit the crash barrier. Basically a total bad mess. The drivers were still in their cars, I guess, processing what had just happened. After seeing it, I immediately started to think that if I hadn't gone back for the water bottle, there's a chance that I could have easily been in the accident, or at least even closer to it. It tripped me out for the rest of the day. Story 15. I'm alive because my aunt was born. My grandfather was conscripted into the Romanian army as a medic, and his unit was one of the many acting as a defensive barrier. She was born, and he was called back to Bucharest from the front. While he was on leave, the Russians launched Operation Uranus, which decimated the Axis forces. He received word that his unit had been completely destroyed. He was never reassigned, and in 1948, my mother was born. I'm also alive because a bunch of Romanian cows got sick. My other grandfather was a pharmacist. Back when that meant actually making medicines, he was also a Jew. The town he lived in was largely agrarian, and their cow herds came down with some illness that was killing them. He whipped something up that cured them. The townspeople were very grateful to him. So grateful that when the chief of police heard that we're coming to town to take inventory of who lived there, he came to my grandfather's house with some train tickets for him and his wife. They escaped and never got caught. My father was born at the end of 1945. I guess this is the opposite of the butterfly effect, really. Rather than one small action blowing up into a much more important chain of events, 2 hugely improbable events are eventually led to my birth and obviously my extended family as well. And now, I run ads on the internet. Story 16. Went to a soccer match on a Thursday night in August 2010 after years of turning down invites from multiple groups of friends. But this time it was for someone's birthday and they gave me a ticket, so I said okay. Fell in love with my local team. I had watched soccer in HS and college and of course the World Cup. But this was different. I rekindled friendships from years before through our mutual support of said team, made new friends, experienced new things because of friends and team, drank more than I usually did. In January 2016, I got laid off from a job I'd grown to hate after 8 years and a lot of rounds of layoffs, just waiting for my number to get called. That March, I was getting antsy and bored at home because I was trying to save money while still looking for work and decided to get off my couch and go to an off-season supporters group meetup, which I usually don't like to do because I'm not good at the social skills. And if I hadn't been unemployed, I know I would not have gone. But that night I met the woman I instantly knew I was going to fall in love with. Got a new job, quit drinking, finally went on a date with her 6 months after meeting her. Figured out I hated the new job, quit that job. Moved to her city 35 minutes south in 2017 and have been working odd jobs part-time and doing gig economy stuff. I moved in 6 months later. We had a puppy magically fall into our lives within 3 days of just talking about maybe getting a dog. And it's my first dog ever, and I am so happy about it. Got engaged, got married in December, and I'm so happy about it. She kept telling me Reddit was actually good. I actually signed up. I saw this post. I replied, "Hi, we also just got a kitten." Story 17. High school, I didn't get into the AP history class wanted. Changed up my schedule, including a different gym class, without everyone I knew. I was heartbroken. I really wanted to teach, and without an AP class senior year, I was screwed. Made a new friend in gym class, who was wearing a volunteer firefighter shirt. He had just joined. Seemed interesting, and he invited me to check it out. They paid for me to get my EMT. Fell in love with healthcare. Fast forward quite a while, and I'm an ER nurse and precept students and new nurses, teaching them how to survive in the ER. I also do public outreach and injury prevention, and I love it. Glad I missed out on my class. Story 18, obligatory. Not my story, but my ex-wife's. We're still friends, though. So I think this story takes place in the summer of 2003. Might have been 2004, not sure, but I think it was 2003. She was up in Cape Cod because her grandmother had a house out in Eastham. Her whole family is up there visiting. Her parents, some cousins, a bunch of people. One day, she borrows her mom's minivan to drive into Boston to meet up with a friend. She's driving back late at night and the road is pretty deserted. All of a sudden, she sees some kind of animal up on the road ahead. She's not sure, but she thinks it might be a wolf. She slams on the brakes. I'm talking crap goes flying kind of slam on the brakes. It's scary and chaotic, and the wolf, or whatever it is, eventually runs off. She drives the rest of the way to her grandmother's house and tries to discreetly tell her dad what happened. But the oldsters in the room have cottoned on to the fact that a secret is being shared, and they all want to know what happened. Eventually, the story comes out. My wife's grandmother, who, God love her, would go on to live to the age of 97, responded by saying, "That's why women shouldn't drive at night." I found this response absolutely hilarious, and for years I enjoyed making reference to it at inappropriate times and circumstances. Anyway, everyone goes to bed and all seems well, until the next day when my ex is driving the same van back out towards Boston. Now, Cape Cod is pretty much a one-way on, one-way off kind of an island, and I forgot to mention, but it's the end of a holiday weekend. I think it was the 4th of July. So traffic is really crazy. Eventually, she is at a standstill on the main road for so long she puts the van in park to wait. And then when traffic moves again, she can't get it back out of park. Like, it just won't shift out of park no matter what she does. She turns the car off and back on. Nope. Nothing. So now she has a car in murderously awful traffic on a road that, if memory serves, only has 2 lanes to begin with, and she can't move. She can't get out of the way. She's stuck in making already bad traffic much worse. She's by the side of the road and people are driving by screaming obscenities at her. And she's thinking, believe me, I would love to duck off right about now, but this car is broken and I don't know what to do. So after what seems like forever, eventually these 2 guys stop to help and they're trying to figure out what's going on. It's a really weird problem and it's taking them a while. And the whole time, my ex is thinking, this one guy looks kind of familiar. Like she keeps eyeing him, trying to figure out if she knows him. And if she does, where does she know him from? Now, at this point, I'll mention the answer to the car riddle, which the 2 guys sadly never figured out. It turns out, and I know how crazy this sounds, that the following had happened. When she stopped short for the wolf, a coin somehow got lodged in the cigarette lighter. It eventually caused a short circuit. The circuit that blew was also connected to the gear shifter. So when the short happened, she was no longer able to shift. Insane. Back to the 2 guys. The one guy notices my ex noticing the other guy and trying to figure out why he seems familiar. And so finally he says, "Do you watch Alias?" And that was when my ex realized that one of the guys who stopped to help her was Bradley Cooper. Unfortunately, selfies weren't really the standard at the time that they are today, so she didn't think to include herself in the picture she took of the 2 guys. But she does have the picture of Bradley Cooper and his friend, the nice guys who stopped and tried to help her with her car trouble. And she didn't recognize him at all at the time, but much later she realized, from looking at the picture, that the other guy was Brian Callen. So, to review, some kind of animal was hanging out in a rodent on Cape Cod one night, and as a result, my ex-wife met Bradley Cooper and Brian Callen. Story 19. When I was at college, I had this buddy who I used to give a ride to and from the campus each day because we lived a couple of streets apart. One morning, I've got Goldfinger, the ska band, not the Bond movie, playing on my CD player in my car. He'd never heard them before, really dug it, and asked me about them. It was the day before Easter break, and he was like, "Cool, I'll check them out." Cut to 2 weeks later, he's telling me how he has bought all their records, got his long-distance girlfriend into them when he visited her, and has basically listened to nothing but them since we spoke about it. I feel good for helping a buddy discover his new favorite band, but think nothing more of it. That summer, me and this dude have a falling out. Long story, but the TL dar is that he screwed me out of nearly 1,000 pounds, and a bit later, I stopped seeing him around. After a while, a mutual friend tells me he's dropped out and moved away. The next summer, a friend of mine asks me if I want a ticket to see Real Big Fish that evening. His sister was supposed to go, but is really sick and can't. I say sure and tag along. We get there, and it turns out the support band is Goldfinger, which is pretty cool. So we're standing there, having a beer in between bands, and I clumsily knock some girl who is walking past's drink out of her hand. I turn and apologize, and offer to buy her a replacement. While we're waiting the bar, we get to talking, and we're getting on pretty well. Me and my friend end up hanging out with her and her sisters the whole night, having a great time, and me and this girl end up exchanging numbers. Cut forward again a couple of years, me and said girl have been together basically since that night. We're moving in together and it's going really great. The night we move in together, we're sitting amongst all our boxes of crap on the only seats that are unpacked. And I say something like, imagine if I hadn't taken friend's offer to go to that RBF show that night. We'd never have met. She's then like, not only that, imagine if you hadn't bumped into me and we hadn't got to talking. Our original plan that night was to leave after Goldfinger played, as they were the only band we were bothered about seeing. I commented something about how I really liked them or something, I forget what. And then I asked how she got into them, and I'm paraphrasing, but the long and short of it was, oh, my sister got me into them. Her good ex-boyfriend got her into them. They were long distance while she studied in the US. They used to go to shows together when he would visit. He's actually from around here, I think. Yep, same dude that I used to give rides to. Bonus butterfly effect. My buddy who was with me at that show actually ended up marrying the sister in question last year. Told her. Managed to set myself and a buddy up with serious relationships just by introducing some random dude who I used to give a ride to school to a band that I liked. To add clarity to all this, I will say that me and said girl are no longer together. This was all quite a few years ago now. We remain very close friends to this day and were respectively best man and maid of honor at my friend's/her sister's wedding last year. She's married to a lovely lady from Scotland and has been for 4 or so years now. They've just adopted their first son. I've been married to my wife for nearly 2 years now. Although you could even add that to the butterfly effect of it all, as it was the same girl that got me the job where I ended up meeting my wife. Life is ducking weird. Story 20. IDK if this counts, but during the Sri Lankan Civil War, my dad and his family were chased out of their home and were forced to seek shelter at his cousin's house a couple towns over. His cousins only had one neighbor, and that neighbor was my mom and her family. They used to meet up at the fence, dividing their lawns and talk for months. One of the pictures from their wedding was them at that fence. Story 21. Entering middle school, I had to choose between foreign language or music. I made my decision. My mother came into my room later that night to make sure I was certain in my choice. I chose music, which led me to pilot training, to radio, to my ex-wife, my kids, Massachusetts, twice, my new partner, and a career in it. I can trace my entire adult life to a decision I made in 5th grade. Story 22. Mom died when I was 3. If she hadn't died, my children wouldn't exist. The short version, my dad wouldn't have remarried, and we wouldn't have moved, and I wouldn't have met my husband. The source of my deepest grief also gave me my greatest joy. Story 23. Me deciding to switch schools. Mom, hey Luke, do you want to switch to a school closer to home instead of staying at Faithway Christian? School. Me. Yeah, sure. Led to the end of me getting bullied, all of my current friends, me being a better, more ambitious student, my future career choice, my entire music taste, my first girlfriend, my first ex, learning about issues in the world. I was sheltered for a long time, abandoning Christianity for deism, getting into robotics and history, getting into gaming, learning coding, more self-respect/acceptance in general, improved mental health. A single yeah sure from a half-awake 5th grader on a whim 4 to 5 years ago literally lead to me becoming an improved person and finding out who I wanted to be. Story 24. Getting my ears pierced the day after I graduated high school got me where I am today. I worked at McDonald's at the time and was scheduled to work that night. Before my shift, my girlfriend at the time convinced me to get my ears pierced. Well, when I showed up to my shift with these clear ear studs in, my manager gave me an option: either take them out or go home. Being only 17 and not taking anything seriously, I went home. On my way home, I called that girlfriend's dad and asked if I could work with him laying tile. He gave me a chance, and I quit McDonald's that day. Worked with him for about a year until the 08/09 recession caused us to run out of work. I got laid off. 4 months later, I landed a job in a new hospital doing admitting in the emergency room. Did that for 2 years before I got my phlebotomy certification. Been doing that for a few years, and now I'm in my final semester of nursing school. I attribute everything I've done to that day. My ex-girlfriend pressured me into getting my ears pierced. Who knows how long I would have stayed at McDonald's? Story 25. I was very little and singing a song completely with made-up words. My mom asked what it was, and I said, Evelynese. My name is Evelyn. Then a year later, I made up a fake country for that fake language, Evelyn. Then I started making up some stories. Now it's a little over a decade later. I'm in high school, and I have a whole fictional world with 3 political superpowers that I won't name for personal reasons. But just know Evelynese has a better name now. This world has a very intricate map of ecosystems, and soon, political borders of various eras, 5 distinct cultural and ethnic groups so far, and some unique flora and fauna. Former Evelynese specifically has 20 families of nobility, 237 common families, a religion, a specific type of domesticated big cat, 2 epics in the works, the first being adapted from older stories I made up, and much more. I'm probably going to work on this until the day I die. All because toddler me wanted to throw some snark at my mom. Story 26. In 1999, I was in Navy Electronic Corps learning about radars. I had been in the Navy for about 6 months, and this was my second consecutive school learning about electronics. I met a guy I'll call SB. We became fast friends, and 2 weeks later, he failed the class we were in together. He confessed that he was just tired of all the studying and tests, so I gave him my super detailed notes to study to help him on the next test. I actually tutored several people over beers and had taught a few classes when the teacher didn't know the subject that well. I was labeled a nerd by my peers, and I was damn proud of it. Anyway, SB took my notes to the chief's review board, and they were extremely impressed with the notes that he was taking and gave him a second chance. SB and I repeated this same process 4 more times. The chief's review board kept giving him second chances because they believed he was truly putting in the work to be his best because of my notes. I graduate radar school and get orders to Yokosuka, Japan, and before I leave to go to San Diego to get specialized training on the SPS-49, I give SB all of my notes and tell him good luck. The son of a Karen passed and got orders to my ship working on another radar. We met up briefly in San Diego, hung out, and when he left for Japan, I told him to have an open tab at a bar waiting for me. His radar school specialty was shorter than mine, so I met up with him 3 months later in Japan in March of 2000. We go out drinking. I get super drunk on Chuhi's, and when we get to the quarterdeck, he tells the officer of the deck he doesn't know me and just leaves me. My first day on the ship, and I just passed out on the front door. 2 months later, that officer of the deck is my section leader chief, and it turns out he's the combat systems divisional chief, and he got mad as hell. When he found out SB and me were friends since school, I helped him get to the ship and he just up and abandoned me. 2 years later, I should have let SB ducking fail. We stayed friends, but our friendship was rocky at best. He dodged work as much as possible, and no surprise was terrible as a technician. I was naive and helping a friend. Then 9/11 happened. In September 2001, Chancellorsville deployed with the Kitty Hawk Battle Group in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, operating in the theater for several months. I was on the Chancellorsville from 2000 to 2003, and we never went to the Gulf. When 9/11 happened, our ship was doing a wet dock, and we had a huge hole cut in our ship to replace an engine part. The entire fleet left without us, and we didn't go back to sea until at least November. It's a cowardly lie that CG-62 is in the Gulf, and it's not just in Wiki, it's in some other Navy online mags. Anyway, 9/11 happened, and a few days later, Skrubsky, dude had to carry a shave chit with him because he had this beard magic where he had to shave every 5 hours due to how quickly it grew, came up to me and asked me to sign a card. When the Pentagon got hit, it killed his best friend from Navy schools. Apparently, I had roomed with Skrubsky and this kid for 3 weeks. I could not remember it for the life of me, but I said I would sign the card since that's the least I can do. Then he asked where SB was at, and I told him up in our radar shop. 10 minutes later, I saw him red-faced and super angry, and I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "That crapbag refused to sign the card. He swapped lives with my best friend," and you know what he said? He said, "I didn't know him, and I don't care." I said, "Wait, what do you mean he swapped lives?" Skrubsky said, "Crapbag failed every ducking class in radar school, but for some ducking reason, the chiefs kept giving him a pass. When it was time to pick orders, He picked last and had to take orders to go to the Pentagon. However, because he has a green and brown blob neck tattoo, he couldn't take the orders, so someone had to give up their orders. I said, "Are you crapting me? Your friend could have been here and Crapbag won't sign a card for trading lives?" For the next year and a half, Crapbag constantly reminded me in various ways that the better man died. Story 27. Not really know if this can be called as a butterfly effect story, but here goes. I lived in a small apartment when I was still studying and had my own washing machine. It broke down at one point and had to go to a laundromat to wash my clothes, since the technician I called was only able to come and fix it in 1 or 2 weeks. The closest one in my street was closed once I got there and had to walk a bunch of extra blocks to get to the next one. While waiting for my clothes to wash, I noticed I forgot my book and my phone. I usually put things I need to pack together so I don't forget something and then forget them altogether. Because I had nothing else to keep myself occupied, I was just looking around at the people coming in and out of the place. That's when I noticed this cute girl coming in. She put her clothes in the washer, walked up to a cash exchange machine when she noticed it was broken. I saw this happening and walked up to her to offer some change. She kindly accepted and started talking afterwards and kind of hit it off. She wanted to give me her phone number, but since I didn't have my phone, she wrote it on a piece of paper. Once I got home, I grabbed my phone to send her a text to say how nice it was to meet her and if I could take her out sometime. To my horror, I couldn't find the piece of paper anywhere. I walked back to the laundromat to look for it, retraced my route back home to no avail. In the weeks following, I couldn't get this girl out of my head, searching everywhere and feeling angry with myself for losing the paper. I didn't know where she was from, only her first name. This was before Facebook was a thing, so I couldn't look for her online. A month or 3 had passed when I got an invite from a friend who was throwing a huge birthday party. I didn't really feel like it at first because it was in another city about 4 hours away. Eventually, I decided to take the train instead and spend the night there. I did have to switch trains in a small city about halfway the trip. While boarding the second train, I was stunned to see her sitting on this very same wagon, reading a book. Overexcited, I walked up to her to say hi. She said hi back, but immediately got back to her book, kind of ignoring me. Stunned, I walked back to my seat and feeling absolutely horrible. Thinking that she was mad that I didn't text or call her back, judging by the look she gave me, I assumed I had no chance of redeeming myself. I sat there for the next 2 hours pondering myself what to do. Before I knew it, we arrived at the final station and she disappeared in the crowd before I had a second chance to talk to her. I almost felt ill with remorse blowing it again. I got the motel, dropped in my bag, and straight away left for the party. I still felt somber when I got there, and after saying hello to my friend, immediately went to the bar to get myself a strong drink and try to clear my head. That's when I heard someone behind me say, "You have no idea how sorry I am for not recognizing you." I turned around and there she was, actually looking happy to see me. I explained I had lost her number and spent days looking for it. Being all caught up in her book and me having my beard grown out a bit and wearing a thick scarf was the reason she didn't recognize me on the train. She did tell me she felt sad for never getting a text or a call and gave me some playful crap about it. It turned out she and my friend who threw the party used to work together during summers. We spent the whole time talking at the party and continued all night after she followed me to my motel room. No, just talking. In the end, I put her number in my phone, emailed it to myself, and wrote it on a piece of paper I put in my wallet, just to be sure. To this day, I always wonder how my life would look like if my washing machine didn't break at that exact moment, or if the first laundromat was open instead, or if I didn't forget to bring my book and was too busy reading to notice her, or if it almost looks like we were destined to find each other. Right now, we've been together for 15 years, married for almost 7, bought a house and have a wonderful 5-year-old daughter together, and she still gives me crap about constantly losing things. Story 28. So my then girlfriend, now wife, were planning on going away traveling for a very long time, several years. The night before we left, I was just packing my things, and at the last minute, I decided to include some camera stuff. I had an SLR that I didn't really use too much. I very nearly didn't bring it because it was big and space was at a premium. While we were away, one of the things we did was work in a wildlife rehab center. At the time we were there, was very quiet, very few baby kangaroos to look after. But we had to be ready, as that could change in an instant. Like in one day, 3 could come in and boom, full-time job. I used this spare time to really get to grips with the camera and learn about photography in general. Now I'm a wildlife cameraman. Had I decided to leave the camera, I never would be doing what I'm doing, which is sitting in a freezing cold shed for hours at a time, waiting for some animals to do something that they're not doing, in story 29. My mother wore heels to work and slipped on the carpeted steps, resulting in a broken high heel and a broken leg. While she was home recovering, she somehow developed allergies that led to her needing an inhaler. The inhaler interfered with her birth control, and now I have a brother 13 years younger than me. Mother confirmed that it was the penicillin that she was prescribed. Story 30, if my former roommate wasn't an alcoholic going through withdrawal and had to be hospitalized, we'd have had enough money for rent. Then, I wouldn't have moved home. If I hadn't decided, while looking for a new job in my hometown, that it would be nice to have insurance, I'd have got another restaurant job instead of a manufacturing job. If I hadn't started that manufacturing job, I'd have never met a coworker who was quitting for a much better job. Then I wouldn't have also applied for a job with that company that was still hiring. I still work here 8 years later and hope to retire from here. It has its crafty days or weeks, but the benefits are amazing, and I'm making more than most college graduates. Story 31 was very depressed. No friends, no hobbies, everyone left. Happened to watch a video how shrooms can cure depression. Made friends with my dealer and his friends, or friends' friends became mine. He sold me shrooms. The trip helped me cope. Got me into psychology and medicine services. Now I'm pursuing EMT. Now have a friend group that helped me when I'm down. They introduced me to my girlfriend. She brought about my hobbies and some of my music taste. Had my friend single-handedly save my life when he called the cops on my worst night. Here I am alive with these glorious people because I thought, why not try this just in case it works before I end it? Seeing this and writing this made me see how good I have it. This story is pretty small, but to me it's big. Story 32. I suffered with ball pain for a week or so to save a life. When I was a kid, my family went from the UK to visit my auntie who worked as a nurse in Germany. Being obsessed with Lego at the time, I was excited to be getting to go the original Lego land in Denmark on the Friday of the week for the weekend. Cue waking up to crippling pain in my groin early in the week. After assuming it was just strain and waiting a few days, on Thursday I was given the choice of going to Denmark the next day or heading to the hospital and staying. I chose the hospital since I was in that much pain. Turns out there wasn't anything to do but take painkillers and chill. When it got round to the Saturday, my aunt went out to get me some Lego to cheer me up. Her and my brother stopped at a swimming pool for a while, and on the way back where she was throwing some of those weight toys that they got from the toy store into the pool for him to dive down and get. Some German teenagers were taking the toys, so my auntie tried to shout at them in broken German, so they left to a deserted part of the pool. Next minute, they pull out a toddler from the pool, completely unconscious. The lifeguards apparently had no clue what they were doing and were trying to call an ambulance, so my aunt stepped in and performed CPR until the kid got airlifted to a hospital. A week or so later, my pain had subsided, so we headed back to the pool. A woman came over to ask for some chairs in German, and my mom said, "Sorry, we are English," and the woman asked in English instead. She turned back around and said, "You wouldn't by any chance know the English nurse that saved a little boy last week?" And she replied, "Yes, it's my sister." The woman said it was all over the local news that this anonymous English nurse saved the boy's life, and she wouldn't have even been in the country if we were in Denmark at the time, let alone be at the pool, sending away the teens to find the kid and then saving him. I still have never felt more glad to get a pain in my balls. Story 33. I realized that I have come full circle in being a loser. Years ago, I was a cashier in a Walmart-type store and lived in a trailer park in number 38. Over a 25-year period, I went to college twice, 2 one-year programs, bought a house, got married, got divorced, sold a house, been single mom, had my own little retail business, yet never really got anywhere. I now work back as cashier in a Sobeys type store and live across the street in the same trailer park in number 48. It is incredibly disheartening to know that after all my efforts, I have gone absolutely nowhere in life. Story 34. When I was in primary school, everyone in class had to write the address of the secondary school they wanted to go to after graduation. There was a briefing of this in class, and I didn't listen to a word the teacher said. So I wrote down my home address, which was further away from where the school was. So while most of my school agreed to go to secondary school A, which is near to the primary school, I was assigned to go to secondary school B, which is on the opposite side of town, much further from school A and my home. My dad tried to get me reassigned back to school where everyone I knew was going to, but the school was somehow already full and I couldn't get in. So the only alternative, other than going to school B on the other side of town, I got into school C, which is nearer to home. Interesting note, I was a timid, reclusive child in primary school, never really had close friends and was often picked on and bullied. So in the new school with new faces, I wanted to make a change for myself and decided to be a prefect for the discipline and boost in self-confidence. I became one of the only 2 prefects to stay one for all 5 years of secondary school. The other was the head prefect. Also, School C was the only school in the district to offer engineering drawing as an elective. So I took the class based on the fact I was good in English and maths, and that paved way to my current career as a civil engineer. My engineering classmates was also much better to interact with than my primary classmates and the childhood bullies. They were loads of fun and stupid that it helped me develop my sense of humor, wit, and self-confidence. I can only imagine if I didn't screw up with my school address. I would still be under the mercy of being bullied and restrained by my own self-doubt and crippling anxiety throughout my secondary school life. The environment wouldn't change my outlook, and I might have stayed reclusive until I graduate secondary school without any career in mind to take. Story 35. I moved to New Zealand to pursue my dream because my ex-fiancé was playing music on a speaker in public and wouldn't stop when I asked. That one incident cracked the relationship so badly, it led to him breaking up, then crawling back. In those 5 hours, I applied for the school I wasn't going to go to because of him. I'm now with the love of my life and couldn't be happier. Story 36. So, my story with a man named Marcus is full of these, but I'll try to keep this from getting way too long. We were in an open relationship since I was 16, 2006. After I, in my head, swore I wasn't into him but finally agreed to a date. We both fell harder than expected. Between him being married twice and several deployments, we always found our way back to each other and never lost contact for more than a few days out of 10 years. He was my person, and I was his kryptonite. A little about him: he had a love for fast bikes and really enjoyed his time on the Autobahn in Germany, as well as was part of a well-known bike club. Fast forward to December 2016. All in a day, he is medically discharged from the military days earlier than expected, signing his second set of divorce papers, his idea, bought a brand new bike to celebrate both, and we were talking plans to finally be serious and committed to only each other. I am talking to him around 7 p.m., 9 p.m. I get a text from his best friend of a news article of a bike crash. Body of motorcyclist missing. 1. Had I not agreed to one date, I would have never known a 10-year love that altered the entire course of my life. 2. Had he been discharged days later as planned, he would have not been on that bike, on that bridge that night, where someone in an SUV felt he was going too fast and purposely cut him off, causing him to hit their rear bumper and be sent flying into a lake where he wasn't found for 3 weeks. 3. Had that person not cut him off, the cop that had already clocked him moments prior, he was already in pursuit and pulled up right as the crash happened, would have had the chance to pull him over and give him a ticket, and he would have made it home. And right now, my head would be in his lap as he played Call of Duty instead of me sitting here alone 2 years later crying about it to strangers on Reddit. There are even more things that happened in between, but this is already too long. Story 37. In high school, I wanted to take French classes, but my parents told me to take Spanish because I would use it more. I took all levels of Spanish in high school, aced the Spanish test for college, and got put in the same class as my current boyfriend of nearly 2.5 years. Another butterfly effect that adds on to the previous thing. My older brother came home on spring break from college and asked if I would like to play Dungeons and Dragons. I obliged, loved it, and played it more in college. It helped me get out of my shell, meet the awesome people that are now like family, and helped me get to know my current boyfriend. Hold on, it gets crazier, bear with me. I had a friend from high school, let's call him DD, hung out with me, and we played Halo. But I needed to go over to my brother's apartment to use his washer. Free washers are better than $2 ones in college. My brother was busy at the time, so we left to go to D's dorm and play Pokemon Monopoly with him and his friends. When Pokemon Monopoly ended, I started up a game of D&D, and my current BF, who was basically a stranger at the time, brought out his mat so I could use it to DMD. And I aren't friends now. He turned into a nice guy after I started dating. But it's crazy how all of these coincidences happened. If I hadn't listened to my parents, played D&D, or hung out with a former friend, I wouldn't know my current boyfriend existed. It's crazy to think how some really specific events, the certain day we hung out, or me playing D&D with my brother, led me to such an amazing person. It's weird because in the Spanish class, we would never talk, but we saw each other every weekday. We actually spoke to each other first when I played D&D with him, and then we talked more. To add on to this, he introduced me to LARPing and Amped Guard. So if it weren't for all the previous things, I wouldn't have been able to meet the huge circle of people I know now, including the guy who got us together. Haha. So yeah, huge and oddly specific butterfly effect for this one. Story 38, TL, Dr. McDonald's likely saved our lives. Me and my girlfriend were on a road trip around the West Coast, and we had planned to spend a night in Las Vegas, go to Zion the following day, do some hiking there, and return for another night in Las Vegas. When we woke up to prepare for the Zion trip, the coffee machine broke down in our hotel, and we couldn't get our morning coffee, so we decided to go to a nearby McDonald's and get some coffee to go. When we got there, however, they informed us that they had run out of milk, which made us a bit angry, but there was supposed to be another McDonald's around the corner, according to our GPS. We arrived to the second McD just to find out it has been permanently closed. At this point, getting a milk coffee from McDonald's has become our quest. We weren't leaving Las Vegas without it. The third McDonald's we tried to find only existed on the map. Not sure if it was recently closed or never existed in the first place. All nervous, we arrived at the fourth and final McDonald's. We agreed that if they don't get the coffee there, we'll stop wasting time and go to Zion. To our biggest surprise, they had the coffee and milk, so we ordered and took the coffees to our car, only to find out that we were served a wrong order. After they replaced the order, we laughed all this situation off and went to Zion. We returned to Las Vegas late in the evening, just before 10 p.m. We started preparing to go out, as we had planned to check out the Harvest Country Music Festival that was happening on the Strip. We knew it was already late, but we thought we'd go anyway. We turned on the TV just before leaving, and all over the news, they were talking about some shooting in Las Vegas. We decided that it had happened sometime before and went out. We were stopped at our hotel exit by a policeman telling us to remain in our room. We had wasted at least an hour in the morning trying to get a coffee. If this wouldn't have happened, we would have made it to the festival in time. 58 people were shot dead that night at that festival. If not for McDonald's, it could have been 60. Story 39, they were promoting at work. 5 people were to be promoted to a higher position in the casino, from floor supervisor to pit manager, a much higher paying, better position. It was a huge staff with many applicants for these 5 positions. The casino manager was bringing in each applicant and letting them know whether they were promoted or not. The 3 guys he brought in previous to me each took their rejection very bad. The guy right before me took it so bad that there was almost a fight. Much arguing. Guy really thought he should have been promoted. Now it's my turn to come in and be rejected for the promotion, and I can see this casino manager's washed out by the last 3 guys, people taking the rejection very hard. I tell him it's okay, maybe I'll get it next time around, and I'm of the belief that things happen for a reason. All BS. But the truth is, I wasn't really upset at all. We had a nice chat about our families, and I believe he was really relieved that I didn't give him a hard time. About 5 weeks pass, and he calls me up to his office to promote me to casino administration manager. I get an office right next to his, and now share his secretary. It was the sweetest position in the casino. Great pay, great schedule, tremendous opportunity, and a ton of responsibility. It introduced me to all of the next level managers and owners and investors. My career took off and I just retired after 38 years. I held all of the highest positions that you can hold in my industry and had a blast. The guy told me one day that because I was so casual during my initial rejection and because I didn't break his balls at that vulnerable moment, that he thought I would be a nice guy to work with. Well, you know, I had this guy's back for the rest of his career. Story 40. I got fired from a company because I asked a coworker if he was gay in order to set him up with my gay friend. I was 21 at the time and really dumb. I had some savings and unemployment money, so I decided to try for a career in the movie industry. I worked for free in a couple of movies and gained some set experience. Well, the savings ran out and I needed to get a real job, so I answered an ad on Monster.com to be an assistant at a pretty large adult company, since they wanted someone with set experience and office experience. I was the assistant to the head of production, which meant I was doing most of his grunt work. Booking talent, locations, crew, managing budget, etc., as well as handling distribution and fulfillment. Basically, I became an adult producer. I left that company and went to work for another adult company where I met a guy who would introduce me to another guy who worked for Digital Domain. He hired me as a day player on the Italian Job, and in the past 16 years, I've worked on 20+ major Hollywood movies, including Avatar, Died Squad, and Aquaman. So basically, if I wasn't an idiot, I wouldn't have the career I have today. Story 41. I met my husband through insane circumstances. I had left an ex who was abusive. I tried to end my life several times and was admitted to a psychiatric care unit. There, I met a girl called Lucy, whose mother was from Greece. She and I became good friends, and we made plans to go on a trip to Greece together and hit all the ancient spots. We got the help we needed and each left the care unit and even moved in together. We became more like sisters. We loved each other. 2 months before our trip, I was meant to go collect some books that had arrived for us in our local bookstore, but I'd had a crappy day in work and was exhausted. Lucy volunteered to go. As she left the shop, a car came onto the curb and hit her. She passed instantly. They never caught the driver. Her mother encouraged me to take the trip anyway and asked, could I take some of my friend's ashes to scatter into the ocean when I got to Greece? I agreed. As I was doing so in Athens, a man came up to me and asked me, was I okay, as I was crying. He was very nice and offered me a coffee in his cafe to help me calm down. That man was called Luca, and he studied mythology and archaeology for fun. I study mythology for fun. I extended my trip by a month to stay with him. He let me stay in his apartment and insisted I stay as long as I needed. When I spoke to Lucy's mother, it turns out that she knew Luca's mother. They had gone to school together. We have been together for 10 years now, married 8, and have twin daughters. Story 42. One day I was working at a surf shop, and at the end of my shift at 6 p.m., I wanted to hang out for a bit to flirt with one of my coworkers, which led to me witnessing a bad car accident 30 minutes later, which led me to meeting an off-duty EMT on scene, which led me to become an EMT/paramedic. And now I love my career. If I didn't decide to flirt with said coworker, I wouldn't be an EMT. Story 43. In grad school, I said duck it and submitted a conference proposal the night before the deadline. Long story short, I basically have my job, my city, and my wife as a direct result of that decision. Story 44. Not my story, but my ex's. I was there when it happened, though. My ex's mom had an accident while young, and she required a hip replacement. They didn't have the money to, so she had to use a cane since she was in her late 30s. While she was going through that, her husband decided he couldn't be seen with a disabled woman, so he left her and their 3 kids that are all a year apart in age. Eventually, he came back, but he kept the other woman. Fast forward to her kids' teenage years. She's a bitter lady who can come off as rude, so she tells me whenever I'm over their house, she will stay in her room because she liked me and didn't want to hurt my feelings. Her husband was always at work, so she was there alone. This went on for about a year. One day, someone knocks at the door. They never get visitors. Apparently, it's an uncle of hers. His car broke down a few blocks from their house, and he decided to stop by and say hi to my ex's mom that he hadn't seen since she was a little girl. I knock on her door. No answer. I assume she's asleep and tell my ex. This doesn't matter to the uncle. He hasn't seen her in years and wants to say hi. My ex shrugs and tell him to go wake up his mom and surprise her. Well, when he opened the door, she wasn't responding, and there were a bunch of pills on her nightstand. We all start panicking, and the uncle just lifts her and takes her to his car, just shouts out the hospital name we should meet him at. She had tried to kill herself that day, and if his car hadn't broken down, he wouldn't have had an urge to see her. She would have died. Story 45. Not entirely sure this counts as a butterfly, but past actions made unforeseen future actions possible. So here. In elementary school, this dumber kid, insults get justified, I promise, tried hanging around me. I was everyone's friend back then, but oh boy, was this kid annoying. Lying, saying my name wrong, throwing a fit in class every day, making the teachers force us to include him. I got him off my back saying something dumb like, I have a secret strike system where if you mess up, I give you a strike. You're on 2 and I don't. Want you to see what happens when it hits 3. Sorry, man. It made 0 sense, and I came up with it on the spot, but it actually worked after he begged me for a while. Fast forward to almost adulthood. He works the same job as my little stepsister. He tried to flirt. She calls me crying about it. I found his Snap Instagram, added him on both, called him right up. He admits to knowing my sister, then says they were on a date, then backtracks to never doing anything, then goes to her coming on to him. And I got to say something like, all right, I've heard enough, man. Strike 3. You remember what that means, right? He went silent and hung up, blocking me on everything. Maybe the butterfly is that the lack of friends made him a horrible person, but we're adults, and that doesn't matter. Pulled up to his next shift like Wassa. Story 46. I was working a really dead-end job, and my car let me down on the way to work. I was an agency worker, so they can at a drop of a hat terminate my employment. They rang me up 30 minutes after I told them I was going to be late in. At that point, my car was recovered, and I was on my way in. To tell me not to bother, as I no longer had a job there, and this made me go back to college and have a goal to go to university. I graduated with honors from university, and after a long time of applying and getting the knock, I built up a portfolio good enough to land a graduate job, which is doing something that I love, that has progression and will give me financial stability. And Story 47 was 18 at my first year of highly prestigious military university. I loved it. I thrived there. I was at the top of my game. I knew what I wanted to do, how to get it, and I was doing it. We were at the O course and we were doing rappelling. I was making my way down the wall when my leg got caught up in the rope. I flipped and my brake hand couldn't react in time. My belayer, dude who is supposed to be watching the rappeller and can pull the rope taut, arresting your descent, was not looking at the rope. He was looking at the trees, the bees, and the birds. Nature there was and is beautiful, but he was not watching me. I fell around 12 feet onto the side of my head and my shoulder, completely messed my body up for a significant period of time, and even now I can't lift my right arm all the way above my head. My life changed in 1/2 of a second. Went home depressed, ate McBananas every day, got fat, played video games, did nothing with my life. Just felt sorry for myself, ended up getting a degree online, decided I liked learning, got a master's, eventually moved to Asia. Now I work no more than 4 hours a day. My 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms on the beach is $220 a month in rent. I just ride my motorcycle and drink 50-cent beers every day. Motorcycle before the beers, don't worry. I am very happy, but I'm also still fat. Been switching from fat, nasty drinks, which I had been hooked on, to good old coconut water, which I can find right outside my door. So far, so good. Story 48. My entire life would be completely different if I had not watched one clip of a movie as a child. When I was about 6 to 7 years old, I must have been on the Disney Channel when a commercial for the classic movie Follow Me Boy came in. It's a movie about Boy Scouts. The clip was only a few seconds long, but in that time, I was intrigued. I begged my mom to drive me to Blockbuster where I render the movie. watched it at least 4 times, decided to join Cub Scouts. When I was ready to become a Boy Scout, I decided to join one particular troop because one of the scouts in it was patient enough to listen to me, regardless of my stutter. His name was Forrest. Forrest was my mentor through most of Boy Scouts in high school. He introduced me to the members of the photo club, where one of the members was in theater. I went with her to a couple rehearsals and was so fascinated by tech that I wound up joining and committing 3 years of my life to theater tech. Finally, in my senior year, having made lifelong friends, 3 relationships through theater, won 2 awards for theater accomplishment, I made my Eagle Scout rank. My grades weren't the best, and if it weren't for that Eagle Scout rank, I may not have gotten into the college of my choice. Having a passion for theater tech, I chose to study new media, where I have since come to college, fallen in love twice, and found one of the best jobs I may ever have, all from seeing a clip on Disney Channel, Story 49. My mother and her 5 siblings were deported to Auschwitz in May of 1944. Soon after arriving by train, my mother was placed into a line of people assigned to take showers after their long trip. My mother was 13 and was holding her mother's hand, obviously very frightened. A soldier spotted this and ordered my mother out of the line and into another line, which was for the work camp. The soldier had apparently seen my mother holding her mother's hand and thought it would be funny to separate them and make my mother cry, which she did. My grandmother told my mother not to worry, she'd see her later. My mother went to the other line and was quickly taken away to the barrack. My grandmother was gassed to death about 15 minutes later, along with one of my uncles. My mother worked in the labor camp from May of 1944 until the Russians liberated Auschwitz in January of 1945. She lived with her older sister in Romania for a few years after that, and eventually met a man who would become my father. I'm sitting here writing this post over 75 years after that soldier cruelly separated my mother from her mother. He unwittingly ensured that I would be born, and so would my brother and my 4 children. Had he sneezed or turned away or was somehow distracted from his duties, possibly thinking about some Fraulein or another, and didn't separate my mother, I'm not here today. Story 50. Living in Florida and it's my birthday, my girlfriend of 3 years tells me she cheated on me. This led my friend and I to go for a walk on the beach to discuss it. On the beach, we were mugged at gunpoint by 3 men, and this made me decide I hate Florida, and I made the decision to move to Seattle. With no money and in a new city, I took a job at Starbucks, served drinks to a Czech woman who worked next door and was there for a 6-month work and travel. She was leaving for LA in 1 week and would be back to Czech Republic in 2 weeks. I asked her if she wanted to hang out. After 1 week, she left, but missed me and decided to fly back to Seattle for 2 days before going home. I picked her up at the airport and asked her to marry me. She said yes. She left for home and finds out her father has pancreatic cancer. He was supposed to die before she would even come home, so he never told her. I quit my job and fly to Czech Republic. He walks her down the aisle and was my best man. I find temp job in Czech Republic, join small startup with 50 people. I start in customer service, but work on tech projects. Company proceeds to explode and becomes huge, 3,000 people. I become senior tech manager. That was a brief history of my past 5 years, how I met my wife and how I got my job, all because my girlfriend cheated on me. Story 51. When I was in grade 6, I won a scholarship from my local council to pay for my books and school stuff to go into high school the next year. High school is 7 to 12th grade in Australia. Because I was being told this, my dad talked to my mom in the garage and put me inside so I wouldn't listen. And the TV was left on and a random ad I had never seen was playing about a new psoriasis treatment trial needed volunteers. I knew my dad had it bad and the number showed on the screen. I remembered the number and didn't write it down. I told my dad about it and he wrote the number on a box in the garage. 2 weeks later, I see the number and asked if he called and he said no. It was weird because I usually don't remember phone numbers at that age and normally my dad wouldn't write on a box. But he actually decided to call up and they booked him in for a medical screen for a pre-health test. During the test the next month, they found his blood pressure was so high, he should have been dead. Like right there, dead. I think it was 245 beats per minute and he was 58. He was given medication for the next few years which prevented the strokes and heart problems from killing him. Had he not had the medication, he would have died within the next month or 2. All because my parents didn't want to spoil the surprise of a scholarship and put me inside to talk. I also have never seen that ad or any medical volunteering ads on TV ever again. Story 52. When I was 14, my brother asked me if I wanted to go to school with him on a Saturday to hang out while he worked on a school project. I never really hung out with my brother because I didn't think he was cool at the time. But I said, "Duck it," and went. It turned out to be a stage crew rehearsal for The Sound of Music my high school put on. I decided to be a part of the stage crew for the entire show's duration. Then I discovered that I was interested in theater. Through theater, I met my first boyfriend, became close friends with my second boyfriend. My second boyfriend wanted me to go to the same college as him and I didn't want to go there. So I compromised and chose a school midway. He and I broke up and On the summer break before my senior year of school, the lead guy from The Sound of Music, who I was only acquainted with but followed on social media, posted a pic of him playing Pokemon Go. I played Pokemon Go too and didn't want to play by myself, so I asked if I could play with his group of friends. We become close that summer. I go back to school for senior year, and he and I get together, my third boyfriend. We have been together for 2.5 years. I live with him, and we go to see the shows my high school puts on, even though we no longer know any of the kids in the shows. No idea what my life would be like if I wasn't bored that day. Story 53. Hopefully this counts. One of my friends, English male, and I, Scottish female, played World of Warcraft. This was during Wotilk. I took a break due to uni work. While I was away, he had went up to this guy in Orgrimmar and randomly called him his sense of humor. They got talking and became friendly. So my friend joined his guild. When I came back after my break, my friend asked if his pal could join the guild too. The GM invited me not knowing if I was male or female. All he knew was that my friend wanted his pal in too, so just assumed I was also an English male. We got talking on Ventrilo, and he was surprised I was a Scottish female, as he was currently living in Dundee. He's a Serbian/Austrian native. We talked for a while, met up, and now live in Austria. We have been married for 7 years, together for 8, and have a son. We'd both been playing WoW since vanilla, playing the same faction on the same server, yet had never crossed paths. We always tell people we met because my friend called him A Story 54. My parents' whole relationship is a butterfly effect, and without that, I wouldn't even exist. My parents both happen to know this one person in completely unrelated ways. My dad used to work on the stock floor and knew this person through other people, eventually becoming friends. My mom worked with this person and became friends through that. There was a dinner party hosted by this person, but my dad was still in a tentative relationship with someone. My parents hit it off, but it took a few more happenstance meetings before their friends basically cajoled them into going on a date. My dad broke up with his girlfriend for unrelated reasons and eventually began dating my mom. There were 1 or 2 instances when my parents almost broke up permanently, but something or someone always saved the relationship. The funniest thing about this is that my mom almost didn't go to the original dinner party. She knew she wouldn't know many people there, and her little introvert self resisted until the last. This was the biggest butterfly effect. Had she not gone, she would have never met my dad. Her parents, my grandparents, are also a butterfly effect relationship, which is a very interesting coincidence. Story 55, my mother's death. My mom was diagnosed with cancer while I was in community college. Unfortunately, she passed, and it was time for me to apply to colleges to transfer. I applied to a college out of state because the running joke in my family was that she loved this place so much. She would have come with me to college to live in my dorm room with me. I applied as a joke, never thinking I would get accepted. Turns out I did, and I accepted the admissions offer. 5 years later, I live 3,000 miles from home and have an amazing life studying science. If she didn't pass away, I would have gone to state school and followed my then boyfriend. I would probably be pregnant and married by now, but instead I'm a very independent person who practically lives on the beach. Story 56. I wasn't making the best life decisions after high school and was failing out of college. I was dating a girl who I broke up with despite it hurting in 2011. I couldn't stand to be home anymore, so I decided to join the Marine Corps. I was going to go infantry, but my recruiter talked me out of it and told me to go into a technical field. I learned it and then got sent to Japan. My unit sent me to a different unit where I met some people who took me out to the clubs. I was supposed to stand duty on a Sunday, 24-hour barracks watch, towards the end of the month, but I was asked by a coworker to switch duty days with them so they could go on a promotion board. This freed me up to go out that Saturday night. That's where I met my wife. When I got out of the Marine Corps, my wife didn't want to emigrate from Japan, so we decided I would work here. I now have a son and fulfilling career that I never would have dreamed of 8 years ago, all because of bad decisions and heartbreak. Story 57. Had a surprise and rough breakup and decided to treat myself to a vacation somewhere I'd always wanted to go. Loved it more than I expected, and 6 months later, I emigrated there. Story 58. I moved home in February of 2012 after living with my grandma for almost a year. Being an awkward gay chick back in her hometown, I decided I needed to make new friends. I got on chemistry.com because it had a setting where you could pick gay/straight along with man/woman in the filters. I wasn't looking for a relationship, just friends, but this cute girl popped up in the search and I clicked her page. We had almost identical interests and she lived very close to the college that I had friends at an hour away. She messaged me, I paid for an account to message back, and we got to talking and hit off immediately. Then I realized that I'd clicked on the wrong profile. She wasn't the girl from the picture, and the picture wasn't a great one of her, to be honest. The profile pics on the site back then were very small and terrible quality. Long story short, we kept talking, went on a date, and celebrated 7 years together in February of this year. Oh, and she was much cuter in person. Story 59. Not me, but my grandpa. His first wife cheated on him with his best friend, so understandably, he was very pissed and wanted to get away. His aunt recently moved to Australia, and he figured he might as well start a new life there. But he already had 2 kids with his ex, and she was worried he wouldn't pay child support if he left the country. She went and got his passport taken away under the premise that he was trying to flee his responsibilities, so he wasn't able to leave. The day after his supposed departure, he went to get drunk at an old colleague's housewarming party and met my grandmother, who was there on a date with another man. They looked at each other and never looked back, been married 52 years, and are as in love today as back then. If his ex-wife wouldn't have been so worried about payments, my grandpa would have gone to Australia. My grandma probably married her date, and I would not exist. Story 60. Back in 2015, my friend convinced me to try playing Destiny. I got the Taken King Edition PS4 and got moderately into it. January 2016, right before I take a break, I find a really cool Left G group. We clear the raid quick and exchange friend invites. April 16, one of those guys starts to live stream. I watch regularly because he was really good. One of the mods in chat scolds me for a tone-deaf joke that I realize and apologize for. No harm done. Later, this mod casually advertises that her clan is looking for members. I join up, and she becomes one of my closest friends over the next couple months. Not particularly exciting in the grand scheme, but I like to tell the story of how I met my bestie through a video game, especially because I may have never met her if that LFG group had been just a couple minutes before or after I looked. Story 61. I joined orchestra because in 4th grade, a girl I had a crush on said she liked violin. 5th grade, she didn't actually join orchestra, but my teacher was nice and gave us candy. 6th grade, same teacher, still got candy. 7th grade, some friends from 5th and 6th grade said they were still going to do it. So I said, what the hell? 8th grade, same as 7th through 9th grade. I finally quit for like a week and a half. I hated drawing, but I needed an art credit, so back to orchestra. 10th grade, we get like 4 field trips a year, cool people in my class, and I need another art credit. 11th grade, I quit for a year because I needed an OCAD credit to graduate. 12th grade, I joined again. I got offered a spot on the university orchestra when I got to college. Story 62. I tried to end my life and was admitted to a psychiatric clinic. Because I was a teen, I had to go to classes in the clinic. A teacher there knew another teacher of a school he thought I would fit into perfectly. Changed school. I felt home for the first time in years in that school. I met my first love there. He helped me get a more positive attitude and essentially helped me out of depression and self-harm. It didn't work out between us, but he's still one of my closest friends. Most friends I have now, plus my taste in music, is thanks to him. If I hadn't tried to end my life when and the way I did, I wouldn't have gone to that school. I would probably have a different job, group of friends, taste in music and attitude today. Or maybe I wouldn't be here at all because I would have gotten even worse and may not have failed my attempt in the first place. Story 63. I was strolling through iFunny 2 years ago and left a comment on one of the featured pictures. A guy responded to my comment. We kept replying to each other for a few days and then exchanged our kicks and started texting on there. 2 years later, and we're now married and have a 3-month-old daughter. I have PCOS, and my doctor informed me I probably could never have children, and he was previously married for 10 years and never had any kids, no matter how much he tried. Later on, he found out he had a really low sperm count. Pretty much impossible for us to have any baby, but we have our daughter now. She is a perfectly healthy baby. Story 64. I had a crush on someone at 2nd grade. I did what a 2nd grader would do when they have a crush on someone. I had to transfer school, and what I didn't know is she also developed a crush on me. 7 years later, I transferred to a different school again. To my surprise, she was also in that school. I only realized when she talked to me on the 2nd week of class, she was my classmate. Well, she did the first move this time. A year later now, she's now my GF Story 65. I'm alive by a decision my grandparents made back when North and South Korea was just one Korea. My father's parents had a huge rice plantation and a lot of assets in the north. Rumors of the country splitting were pretty rampant across the area, but it was just that, rumors. They eventually decide that it's too much of a risk to stay, because it doesn't matter how much property you have if the government owns everything, so they took a boat to the south. 7 days before the DMZ cut Korea in half. They started life over with practically nothing, but they did okay. Had 7 kids. My father met my mother in Incheon, South Korea. They gave birth to me. Now I live in America. 2 generations removed from a poverty-struck third world country family. Now I'm living comfortably in the middle class. Life is good. Story 66. In the co-ed dorms in college, the girl that lived next door to us dated one of the guys upstairs. It did not go well, and he and the rest of the guys really disliked her. They would stomp and jump and make horribly loud noises to make her mad, which led to my friends and I going up there to yell at them. We really just wanted to scare them into thinking we were pissed. And that's the night I met my now husband. He was the roommate of the guy. Story 67. Friday afternoon in Switzerland. Thinking about driving to Saint-Tropez for the weekend with my best buddy. Deciding against it last second and going to Brussels to a tattoo convention for the weekend. Booking the last available hostel an hour before arriving, having to detour for like 30 minutes because we ran out of gas, arriving at 11:30 p.m. in Brussels at the hostel bar instead of 11 p.m. Connected story. U.S. girl Euro railing, currently in Amsterdam at a weed convention. Hopping on a train to Brussels, realized she still had some of the good stuff on her. Getting out of the train, getting rid of it, taking next train, booking second last available hostel room in Brussels for the weekend. Arriving at 11:30 p.m. at the hostel bar instead of 10 p.m., too little gasoline and too much weed brought my wife and me together. Story 68. I was encouraged to enter a poetry competition by my teacher when I was about 17. There was a cash prize, so I decided after some convincing that I would give it a try. I ended up winning, and my poem became published. A couple of months later, I get a message on Facebook from a girl who would like to know more about the poem because she has to analyze it in connection with her upcoming exam. It turns out her and I are about the same age, so we decide to meet up and discuss it. We've been together for 4 years now, and we're getting married next month. I often wonder what my life would look like if my teacher hadn't approached me back then. Story 69. Learned programming out of spite, which made my career possible. I had no interest in computers or just wanted to play games, approximately 1994. But I had a cousin my age, and I always was kind of a banana to him and wanted to be better in everything he did, except school in general. Once he told me he learned to code in school, basically just copying HTML in BASIC, and he was totally into it. I pushed myself hard to learn it too, and just kept doing it and showing him all the advanced things I did that he didn't know how to do. Forward to 2005. I was still programming and founded a company that still exists today, and I make a good living and just built a house last year with my soon-to-be wife. Story 70. Back in the 80s, my mom studied abroad in England. A couple days before her flight back home to the US, she got too homesick to wait any longer and spontaneously bought a ticket home early. The flight she was originally supposed to take was Pan Am Flight 103, where all 243 passengers and 16 crew died. If not for her homesickness, her and my dad would not have met, and my brother and I would not have been in existence. What's the worst butterfly effect that you've set off, whether on purpose or on accident? Me spotting a weird light outside my window led to me becoming homeless. A couple years later, saw a weird light outside our house one night. Told Mom. It turned out to be my dad calling his mistress. Divorce. Mom gets sole custody. Some time passes. My mom is ready to move on and reconnects with an old boyfriend. They decide to go on a trip together. He and my mom end up in a car accident. She dies. I'm just about to turn 18, so I can't go into foster care, and my extended family takes her crap and ditches me. Homeless. It's really weird to think of it this way. I do wonder what would have happened to me, or to her, if something in there had gone differently. Story 2. Asked 2 of my college friends if they were dating. The guy in he's life. Are you guys dating or what? We should be, shouldn't we? They start dating not really working out after a few months. Guy's PTSD and bipolar flares. If you leave me, I'll hit myself. They break up amicably after he gets some therapy mental health flare. Decides it's time, wraps his car around a tree at night so parents can cash in his life insurance. Bonus consequences, she's depressed from the death and gets self-destructive looks for rebound sex. Finds cool, but unemployed biker dude loses her job and not using protection gets pregnant. Decides to keep the kid and stay with the guy while both unemployed. Turns out, I ruined the lives of 2 friends via butterfly effect by asking for clarification. I know I can't blame myself here, but that doesn't stop me from regretting the decisions I made along the way. Story 3. One night, I decided to get drunk instead of studying in college. Went out with a few friends who I convinced to go out with us. One friend meets a girl that he ends up falling in love with. So he moves out of my buddy's apartment, leaving a spot open the next year that they need to have subleased. Ends up being a girl who wants to get in this apartment. I see her a lot since she lives with my buddies. I start dating her. It leads to the worst, most destructive, manipulative 2 years of my life, where she leaves me 2 months before the wedding for another man and took all my money. Had to move back home and start my life over living with my parents, all because I wanted to get drinks one night. Story 4. In 1971, I was in the pub with a bunch of friends talking about the following year's Olympic Games to be held in Munich. Someone suggested we should go to the Oktoberfest beer festival, and eventually 4 of us booked the holiday, drank our own weight in beer, and came home with a lot of stories. A young guy who had just started coming into the pub listened to all the stories, and a couple of years later went to Munich to see it for himself. Fell in love with German culture, cuisine, and the ambience of the place. 20 years later, after the failure of his marriage, he went to live in Germany, hooked up with a Fraulein, and I used to visit him every year until he was killed in a car crash in 1998. And I still sometimes wonder about the effect of that first trip to Munich. Story 5. I sent my wife's lover's chat log and hotel receipts to his mother, thanks Facebook. They live 2,000 miles from us. And after doing some digging into him, when I found out, I realized that His mother was supporting him and his wife and 3 children. He's 44 years old. His mom kicked him out, but let his wife and kids stay. His wife divorced him. I divorced my wife, now he's living in his car. I'm not even upset about it. Fuck my wife, fuck your life. Story 6. Told my older sister and her friend that I can predict the future as a joke. They thought it would be fun to know their future. I predicted for my sister's friend that she will lose a lot of weight, she was obese, and that she will ditch her boyfriend because she will think she can do better now and then marry a British guy. She's Lebanese and never been to Britain. Told my sister that she will immigrate to Canada, meet a guy whose family used to live in our hometown, and then they will get married. Fast forward few years. My sister's friend did a gastric bypass surgery and lost a lot of weight, dumped her boyfriend and met a British guy teaching in the same school as she's, and then got married. My sister applied to Canada and got the immigration. Met a guy whose family lived in the same hometown as we used to, and then they got married. To this day, I wonder if I did predict the future or if it was just an effect of what I said to them. Story 7. Texted my backcrap crazy ex that we should hook up sometime because I was home alone and drunk/high. Well, she responded a few minutes later saying, sure, and she took the train up to my place. We hooked up all night, multiple times, and not gonna lie, it was a ton of fun. That was a Friday night. On Monday, she texted me. She was pregnant and sent me a pic of an ultrasound and 3 positive pregnancy tests. Well, I called her out on her crap. That was a blatant lie. And there was no way she was pregnant that soon, and it would not show up on a test that quick. Well, this was her ploy to get back with me, and it backfired hard on her and sent her into this downward spiral, and she ended up in a mental ward for a few days. Story 8. Pressured a guy in his 50s to do an assault course race so I could get a $10 discount. If we had 5 people, it is cheaper. He eventually gave in. Made it to the 5th mile, slipped and tore his cruciate ligament. He couldn't work, so stayed at home with his wife. He started arguing with her a lot. So much they decided to separate and get divorced. He moved out, his adult children hated him, and he rented a house from a mutual friend. A few months later, our mutual friend calls me to let me know that 50s guy had poorly screenshotted mutual friends' photos from Facebook and used them as his own on Tinder. All well and good, except he was a 5'2", 50-year-old Latino guy. Mutual friend was 6', 30-year-old white guy. Usually my mutual friend wouldn't be that bothered, except he found out from his wife as one of her friends saw his photo on Tinder, but with Latino guy's name instead. They were also about to get married, so both were really angry. Mutual friend tried to ring Latino guy. Latino guy hung up when he realized he was busted. Long story short, my mutual friend evicted him. Yeah, my bad. Story 9, agreed I slept with my then boyfriend and 2 people he didn't know, but I knew. Didn't go well. He ended up leaving me for them. Wild. I moved across the country for a job I probably would have turned down if I weren't single. He ended up breaking up their 4-year relationship. Because of one weird drunken night, I started a different career. He ended what could have been a marriage. One of the guys is now engaged to someone else, and the 4th person deleted all social media and got fat. Story 10. I'm a big fan of this theory as I believe a lot of major incidents can be traced back to one defining choice or action. A bad one that jumps out to the front of my brain. I was studying in college, pre-university in the UK, when a classmate suggested I joined a sort of social networking website dedicated to meeting people who will be going to the same university as you. I joined and became friends with a really lovely girl. We got talking and everything about her ticked all the right boxes, or at least to 19-year-old me. Fast forward a few months, we are both at uni and dating. We have our ups and downs, but they were very extreme ups and downs. I hated my course I was on, product design, and applied to another university to study architecture, something I always wanted to do. But I stupidly got cold feet as it meant I would have to move away and I didn't want to leave her, so I rejected their offer. We broke up shortly after and had a very messy and public breakup, along with having to see her get with her friend that I sort of knew had a thing for her, along with rumors going around that I hit her, which I didn't. So I'm 99.99%. If I never had that conversation with my classmate, I wouldn't have joined that website. I wouldn't have met my ex. I would have gone to a different university and my life would be very different right now. That's mad. Story 11. I have a few of these incidents, but this one in particular really shifted my life in a pretty big way. I used to work for an MLM when I was 19th. I was doing really well within the organization and I had a decent trajectory in terms of getting enough people on my team, which would have allowed me to earn 6 figures. I was stoked. Anyway, one night me and a handful of coworkers were at a bar drinking and playing golden tea. The bar never carded me, so I had free reign there. One of my coworkers runs up to me and asks me if he could borrow my car so he and another coworker could pick up beer at the store. To be honest, I have no idea what their end game was, but I had this really sweet 1991 Toyota Mr. 2 at the time, and I loved it. So I asked him if he was drunk, and he assured me he wasn't. So I gave him my keys. Cutscene to like 3 minutes later, and someone comes running into the bar from outside screaming, "They got into a wreck." So I run outside, and my coworker had managed to wrap my ducking car around a light pole in the bar parking lot. There were two people in my car, which left 2 head imprints in my windshield. They ducking totaled my car. Unfortunately for me, I only had liability insurance, and my coworker was broke, so I was ducked, no car. I couldn't get to work. Now, mind you, this was in 1999, so there were no Ubers or anything, and because I was having a hard time getting to work, I started running out of money. Finally, I had lost all my motivation to move forward with that job and found myself carless, jobless, and living in a friend's basement. 2 months later, I joined the Air Force, and it completely changed my life's trajectory. All because I trusted some dip crap with my car keys for 3 minutes. Crazy. Story 12. This is really a best butterfly effect, but I had a baby girl a couple of years ago and decided to get a vasectomy a year later because my wife and I were in our 40s and we knew we didn't have the energy or finances for another. Cue the urologist finding a lump in my left testicle and deep in my abdomen. Testicular cancer that had spread to points in my abdomen. 6 months of chemo later, I'm right as rain, but I would never have found out about it until it was in a much more potentially lethal and painful stage. Story 13. Had a flight booked to Bangkok, Thailand from Canada. En route to the airport, decided I wanted to leave big cities for some sun and beaches. Booked a flight to Phuket before departure, and upon arrival, took a ferry to Koh Phi Phi. Met this beautiful girl the next morning and had a deep conversation. Never thought I'd see her again as she was leaving. Ran into her before she left the island to find out she was staying for another night by herself. Fell in love, and we're still together 3 years later. Never expected that. I don't know if this adds to the effect, but I might add, she is also a fellow Canadian from my province, and I had partied in her university town several times before in a lot of the same establishments without knowing each other. Thank you for all the upvotes and kind words. Story 14. Had an abusive girlfriend when I was 18. Naive me didn't realize that was a thing, especially from a woman. Not physical, emotionally, and then exploited that to basically steal from me. I made a lot for an 18-year-old at the time. Got engaged to said girlfriend. One of my coworkers kind of saw what was going on and found out she was banging one of his friends. He told me. I got upset, punched a plywood wall, broke my hand, told her to duck off and cut off anything that tied me to her. I moved to a different city. Being there completely changed my outlook on life for the better. Went to school. Have a pretty damn good paying job, and I don't take crap from anyone anymore. If my coworker didn't decide to be a bro, things would be probably much worse for me. Don't be that banana that doesn't tell someone that they're being cheated on. Seriously, that's a banana move if you keep that to yourself. Story 15. I called 911 to get a homeless guy medical help, but they ended up arresting him instead and threatened to arrest me for making a false police report. I still feel bad they arrested him. I was just trying to help the guy out. I didn't get arrested, but my boss was pissed at me. Story 16. Got a friend/former coworker a job at the office where I worked. Basically, she got from a part-time retail job to a full-time office job. Friend later turned on me, spread lies about me behind my back, tarnished my reputation, and later got me fired. Less than 4 months before my wedding. Most of the people I worked with were invited to the wedding and/or other events related to the wedding, and very few, except my closer friends, came because of the awkwardness. I guess you could also file this under no good deed goes unpunished. Story 17. This kid used to bully me in school, so I complained to my mom, who took it up with the principal. Apparently, this wasn't the first complaint, and he had been kicked out of his previous school for the same reason. However, it turns out that he's my dad's boss kid, and the dad, for some weird-ass reason, decides to take revenge by stopping my dad's promotion multiple times. Dad takes up another job, but he has to move to another city while we stay back because stability. Dad has an extramarital affair there. Mom finds out. It's an absolute crap show in my house for the next 3 years. My parents hate each other's guts, but refuse to divorce because codependency and societal pressure. I spend those 3 years breaking up their fights and trying to talk reason into their thick skulls while also managing the household and my studies. Anyway, I've got depression and anxiety now, and all because I couldn't suck up and take some bullying as a kid. Limo. Story 18. When I was 21, I dropped out of college and waited tables for a bit. I had offers from 2 different restaurants. I waited tables for about a year at a big chain restaurant. I started picking up bartending shifts, then was made shift leader, manager, and finally assistant general manager. I dated a few waitresses and ended up marrying one. The marriage lasted 13 months and ruined my confidence. I went back to waiting tables and didn't date for 5 years. I barely got laid in that time. 15 years later, I finally start trying to date again and fail miserably. 5 years after that, I meet my wonderful wife, and we have a great 4-year-old now. I don't know what would have happened had I taken the other job, but I probably wouldn't have spent 20 years alone. I still don't know how to be in a relationship, but I'm trying. Story 19. I moved across the country to live with my best friend, Red, basically my brother, so he and I could hold each other accountable, and support each other in quitting substances. It worked, but after a few weeks, we had a falling out over a mess in the house, and I moved back west. He never answered another one of my calls, and about a year later, I got a phone call from someone who explained to me that he died. After I moved back west, he relapsed. I'm grateful that the last thing we said to each other before I walked out the front door for the last time was telling each other, "I love you, bro, rip my dude." Story 20. I finally have a chance to tell this story. I'll try to not make a novel of it, but I apologize in advance for the wall of text. But here's my tale. Stopped by my parents' house. One Saturday afternoon, nobody was home. I had an encounter that resulted in my dad getting fired from his job and the eventual downfall of the company he worked for. I was on my way out to hang with friends for the night and figured I would stop by my parents' house to say hi. My parents were away for the weekend at a conference related to my father's work, which I didn't know, but will turn out to be an important piece of the story. I think I saw my sister for a bit before she went out. Since I had time to kill, I decided to hang around. I was in the office in the basement when I glanced to my side and saw somebody peering through the window into the room across the hall. The house was out in the woods, and this window was in the back of the house, under the deck. I got up and he waved and indicated that he was heading to the door. I got upstairs and looked outside, but could not see any car in the driveway. The driveway was a semicircle, and there was only a very small area that could not be seen from the house. Anybody coming to He House would normally park right in front, not the one small area where a car couldn't be seen. The guy approached asking for my father by name and said he worked with him while pointing out that he was wearing a company shirt. He told me that he had given the guys a little holiday gift, but my dad wasn't there. Remember when I said he was at a work-related conference? And since he was in the neighborhood, he decided to stop by and drop it off. I was so confused by all this. I didn't call him out on any of his bullcrap. He was empty-handed and my parents' house wasn't in a neighborhood. Nobody was ever just in the neighborhood. There was nothing around that anybody might just be passing by. You had to make an effort to go there. I offered to make sure he got the gift that this guy didn't have on him, and he said he had to get it from his car. At least now I got to see where he hid his car. He reached in and came back out with a small gift pack of jams and jellies or something like that, commented on how his wife forgot to fill out the card, and then took out a pen and signed it. He then gave it to me, asking to let my dad know he stopped by and left. The whole encounter seemed so bizarre that I had no idea what to say. I left the gift on the counter and went on with my day. The next night I called home, and while talking to my mom, I mentioned the gift. She immediately sounded very agitated and said, "Tell me what the hell that was all about." So I told her the story of the guy that didn't ring the doorbell, but was instead peering in a back window under the deck. He said he was passing by and wanted to drop off the gift that he meant to give a few days earlier, even though he didn't have it on him and the card wasn't signed. I could hear her on the other end of the line saying things like, "What in a hole?" She then informed me that he was my father's boss/owner of the company, and he certainly knew they weren't home since they were at a conference. Next day, my always cool, never yelling dad showed up to work, stormed into the boss's office, and let him have it about how much of a creep he was, because he knew my parents were away and my 20-year-old sister was home alone for the weekend. Told him to stay away from our family and a good amount of swearing at him. When he left the guy's office, everybody in the place was staring and wondering what happened to cause all that. Later in the day, my dad was informed that his contract would not be renewed at the end of the year and he should pack his things and go home early. I felt bad about it at this point, but my parents told me that the guy had a reputation as a bit of a creep and dad was thinking about leaving, so this event would have been the last straw anyway. He also had places reaching out to him about jobs by the time he got home, so he got to take an extended vacation and start fresh in a few weeks. I thought this was the end of the story, until almost a year later when I was visiting, I heard my father having a conversation with a former coworker from the other job. I asked if he was still poaching former workers, and he said he couldn't take any more, but was sending them elsewhere. Then, channeling Paul Harvey, he told me the rest of the story. Short version of the aftermath. Word got out after the incident, and several prominent accounts dropped them and went elsewhere, as did a few workers. The other owner decided he wanted out, and there was a court battle over forcing a buyout, and the building which belonged to the good owner. Good owner then joined forces with the company my dad was at, and they achieved much success. Story 21. So you know the protest in Hong Kong and now the coronavirus. And here's the story. A man thought his girlfriend cheated on him, so lost his when they traveled to Taiwan. Hong Kong and Taiwan have no mutual legal assistance between them, which means they can't bring that man who are back in Hong Kong to court in Taiwan, which led to Hague government want to make an edit on the legislation and might open a loophole for China to arrest and charge anyone in Hong Kong. Then the protest happened. And because of the protest, the tourism activity drops a huge amount, and therefore the coronavirus isn't widely spread in Hong because no mainland Chinese came here. What a butterfly effect. Story 22. Caused my mom's boyfriend to be arrested by eating cookie dough and then blaming him for it, which caused my mother to get pissed off and make him go out to go get more. But recently, one of the taillights died, and so he got pulled over to get a fix-it ticket, which California loves to give out. But when they ran his ID, they found a warrant out for his arrest because when he worked at a hospital, he stole a few of the computers and thus he was arrested and I never say him again. Story 23, I gave my cousin chickenpox. His dad, my uncle, never had it as a kid. It's bad to catch as an adult. So my aunt had to take care of him the whole time, followed by the other kids in the house. This was pre-internet, so she missed critical assignments and a final for a grad school class. She had to go back the next semester to retake the class, then met a charming young man in class who she started an affair with and was caught, resulting in a messy divorce. My uncle fell into deep depression and was fired for drinking on the dim. Story 24. Not worst, probably best actually, but my house burning down in 2001 in high school paved the road for the rest of my life. My house burned down in 2001. Because of this, I started taking a different bus to school because I was living with a friend. Because of this, I met my first real girlfriend and real relationship in high school. She convinced me to go to college where she was going. I had no idea what I wanted to study, but the degree I got wasn't leading to any job prospects in the area, so I moved 20 hours south. GF and I had been split up for a few years by this point. That's where I've been since, with my now current wife, our house, and kid on the way, and I couldn't be happier. If the house didn't burn down and I hadn't met the OG GF, I probably wouldn't have gone to college and probably would be living in the same town I grew up in, working at the local mill or whatnot. Story 25. I told my friend that there were some serious suspicions that his girlfriend was cheating on him, which turned out to be true. Turns out Buddy's ex took it out on her former college roommate and destroyed their friendship because she thought the roommate was the one who ratted her out. The friend wound up not really talking to much of her friend group from college at all as a result, and the first person who reached out to her pitched an MLM she accepted. So now she's all in on an MLM because I told my friend about his girlfriend cheating. Story 26. When I was younger, I absolutely hated school. Zero interest in it. I ended up switching schools in 6th grade and knew no one there. I broke my leg really bad, had to be on crutches for 6.5 months during winter. I gained a ton of weight, and I started to get bullied in school. I had no friends, so my mom got me into reading. I found out I love books, and I was actually pretty good at school when I tried. I'm still chunky, but I'm in medical school now, which for sure wouldn't have happened otherwise. Story 27. I would always go up and visit my cousins in New Hampshire. There were 3 of us girls until my aunt and uncle took in their niece, cousin of mine from a different uncle that had a substances problem. She was 1 year older than me. Let's call her Sally. So it ended up being 4 of us from then on. Anyway, we would always put on shows and play dress up. We would act or dance and record them on my mom's VHS recorder. One day we decided to all pretend to be Power Rangers. Since we were all girls, we were very limited to what colors we could be. My older 2 cousins didn't care, but cousin Sally and myself both wanted to be the Pink Ranger. Little did she know, I had been the Pink Ranger for Halloween and had packed my costume for this very moment. I went and put it on and said that since I had the costume, I'm Kimberly the Pink Ranger. I wore it for 2 days straight and thought I had won the battle. We continued playing for the next few days until my cousin, Sally, decides to stop responding to her name when she's being called. She's in full protest mode now since I was the Pink Ranger the days before. She refuses to go by Sally anymore and is making everyone call her Kimberly. She keeps this going for the remainder of the week. I am there and my mom convinces me to let her be the Pink Ranger. I give in and say okay. We go back to my state and I come visit again in the summer. When we go back up a few months later and visit, they are all still calling her Kim. Even my grandmother was calling her that. We attempt to play Power Rangers again and she says she's the Pink Ranger because her name is Kim. At this point, I'm so confused. Turns out she no longer wants to go by Sally anymore. And all of the parents, grandparents agree that it reminds her too much of her unfortunate past, so they are respecting her decision of being called Kim. So from then on, for the rest of my life, she is referred to by everyone as Kim. It went so far that they actually paid to legally change her name from Sally to Kimberly. So to this day, on all government documents, schooling, driver's license, her name is now legally changed to Kim. She won. Story 28. This may not be the worst as ops intention, but this is hell of a story of my life. Since it spans a long time frame, I'll just write the milestone. Super short backstory. I was a pretty bullied and emotionally ducked up little man when it all started. My first serious girlfriend also wrecked me up pretty badly. I also had a serious case of dance phobia and lack of confidence. My friend invited me to watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. After watching the movie, a lot of things made sense, and I decided to mend myself. After some time, I had a crush on a girl from the orchestra I'm playing with. With my newly acquired knowledge and half-confidence, I opened myself up. She looked like interested, but she's one of the most sinister and passive manipulative people I've met. She completely wrecked me, slowly and surely, then throws me away like a well-squeezed orange. This triggered all my damage and instability from my middle school years and related bullying. I started to destabilize further and further, decided I need therapy. Therapy fixed most things, but not all. I was on my feet now, left the therapy with the words, "Maybe I'll even dance someday." I somehow met with one of my old friends in one of the orchestra concerts. Things progressed and I proposed. We've engaged, but in the last 2 months, things got super bad. She becomes stubborn, and her family tried to use and exploit me. I've burned all the bridges and called everything off in a 5-minute phone call and left for a vacation. I got a car and my home and renovated it in the process. Coincidentally and subconsciously, I've built my dream house. As a bonus, most of the things I've dreamed about are also present in it. Being abused emotionally broke a wall inside me, and I started to grow stronger somehow. I also started to lose my excess weight. One night after dinner, I decided that I'll try dancing. I went one of the better tango studios and got enrolled. 2 weeks later, one of my close friends sent an email about meditation. I've met with the teacher and decided to start, I wanted to learn, meditation since I was a teen BTW. Today, I've completed my PhD, dancing and advanced tango class, and I'm a level 1 meditation instructor. I transformed from a wimpy and slightly overweight computer nerd to someone completely different. Just because I've watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and moved. Thanks for reading this far, story 29. I casually mentioned I didn't want to move to Texas, and my husband now has an amazing job that relocated us to Michigan. Years ago, my husband hated his job. I hated it for him. We were living in Florida, and he had basically topped out with his career locally. His workplace was figuratively toxic, and he's talented and skilled, so got occasional job offers that would require relocation. One was to a job in Texas. He mentioned it offhand, and I joked, "Well, we'll miss you, because no way in duck am I moving to Texas." I even laughed, because I was teasing. I didn't hear much else about that job and figured it had fallen through. If it had proceeded, we would have had to talk logistics about relocation and such. A couple years later, he mentions not taking that job stalled out his career. Wait, what? Well, he explains, I had said no and shut it down. I tell him I didn't, that I was joking, that we should have actually talked about it. He ends up quitting his awful job and starts a company with friends, but he is now in a massive depressive state and doesn't enjoy the company, so looks for other work. He takes another off-brand job as his kind of a favor to a friend and gets bought out of the company he helped start per his request and continues at this off-brand job for 3 months. When he hears about his dream job, he dismisses it, doesn't even apply. They contact him a couple months later as someone within the company suggested him. It ends up taking another 6 months or so, and he gets this dream job in Michigan. He had been suggested for the position by someone who he had worked with at the toxic company. If I hadn't dismissed Texas, he probably wouldn't have worked with her, and she wouldn't have suggested him for the dream job, and we wouldn't be in Michigan. We would either be in Texas or still in Florida. Story 30. Took a job as a guitar teacher in high school. Owner said she wanted me to commit for 2 years. Didn't go to uni because I wanted to honor that commitment. Spent my first year out of high school bouncing between temp jobs. End of the year, decide to go abroad and work at a summer camp in the US. Love it so much, I want to go back again. Set up my life so that every year I can go back and work at camp. Start going to other countries for my off season. 9 years in, come to Sweden to ski. Get depressed and lonely because I'm broke, and it's taking ages to find a job. Messaging friends a bunch. Turns out one of them is into me. Get a job. Get a girl. Get happy. Story 31. Asked my friend through a text randomly on like a Thursday or something if he knew anyone I could date. He mentioned his girlfriend's cousin. We all went on kind of a group date. That was over 10 years ago. My wife and I are about to celebrate our 8th wedding anniversary. We have 2 amazing boys who we can't live without, live in the home area we love with neighbors we love, and are soon going to be trying for our 3rd. Gotta say, I'm happy as hell I sent him that text. Story 32. The Blair Witch Project led to me meeting one of my closest friends, and I haven't even seen it. I was an animal control officer out investigating a report of some abandoned animals. The report turned into a big case that ended up with every available officer being called to the scene to help gather evidence, secure the area, etc. That meant that my sergeant got there to get me to do whatever he didn't want to. I had only been on the job a couple of months, so I didn't know anybody all that well, and I was the new guy. The place was a small farm with a big patch of woods on the back of the property. There was enough going on with the farm that the woods had to be searched and cordoned off as a crime scene. My sergeant didn't want to do it because he didn't want to walk into some Blair Witch crap. So, new guy gets the prize. Nobody knew where the owners of the property were, so I get paired with a partner for safety. My new partner, Presley, name changed because internet, seemed cool. I thought I'd heard him mention a Street Fighter tournament, which stood out in a department of good old boys. I'd never taken the chance to get to know him though, as 80% of our calls and paperwork were handled solo. So color me surprised when, as I'm wrapping police tape around a tree, I hear Dearly Beloved start to play. This gentle piano piece is the theme to the first Kingdom Hearts game, one of my favorite series of games of all time. Presley is scrambling to drop the tape and pull out his phone and mute the call. He's apologizing profusely since we technically aren't allowed to have person phones on his. I assure him that I give zero ducks and love his choice of ringtone. We get talking about KH, then games as a whole, and generally begin to feel less miserable about what turned into a 15-hour shift. He and his wife joined our D&D group. We team up for Smash tourneys, and he is set to be my groomsman in the summer. All because a ranking officer was scared of some Maryland woods.